Hello everyone, Alex here. I just wanted to put together this little video again showing off the power and excitement in having a 201k-3 powered by a servo motor instead of a domestic belt-on motor or a potted motor or a treadle or anything like that. So this is a Consew CSM 1000 servo. It has 3/4 horsepower and it has a 14 millimeter pulley. It comes with most servo motors come with a 75 millimeter pulley, but I wanted it to be able to sew quite a bit slower than a 75 millimeter pulley would give me, so I wanted to exaggerate the gear ratio between the size of the hand wheel and the size of the pulley, and since I couldn't or didn't want to buy a enormous aftermarket hand wheel to go on this machine, I just went with a smaller pulley, and it was quite easy. You just use a socket wrench and take off the nut and remove the 75 millimeter pulley and put on an eBay. I think the pulley cost me like $7-8, something like that. It came from China, so it took a little while to get, but I put the 14 millimeter pulley on instead, and I get a very slow speed if I want it, and I can also obviously go quite a bit faster. So there are pros and cons to it. Obviously it's a little bit bulkier to have a large industrial motor underneath the table. I don't have as much flexibility with moving the machine around. I pretty much just set this machine in the table, and it's been sitting here untouched for a couple months now. 4 months, something like that. I've been using it. Conceivably I could put any other machine in here with a belt guard or without a belt guard, but you know, I kind of like the configuration, so I keep it in there. Now the motor itself, the Consew CSM 1000, is a 3/4 horsepower motor, but it does have a couple of idiosyncrasies, such as the fact that in order to adjust the height position of the motor to stretch out the belt, or to, you know, bring it closer to the machine if you have a shorter belt, it's a sort of a pendulum swing as opposed to a set screw that moves it at a set angle with each turn. So I don't really like that very much. I wish that it had a set screw that you could just rotate the nuts to move the motor away from the machine or towards the machine. But this one has one nut and then it just kind of swings back and forth, so you have to kind of use your... I'm right-handed, so I hold the thing with my left hand and then I loosen the nut with my right hand, and then I have to hold it in place and tighten it, and it took a little bit of time. But with this textured belt from McMaster-Carr, it's a 6 millimeter textured rubber belt meant for, I don't know, probably like some kind of automotive or industrial purpose, not a sewing machine belt, but it certainly fits the bill, and it fits the groove on the hand wheel, and it pairs well with the pulley that I put on the motor. So everything is fine. Everything works really well. It did take a long time to put everything together because I had to sort of custom cut. I didn't do the cutting myself, but I had the table custom cut, and then I had to order all of the pulley and the motor and all the pieces, and then I had to order, I think at this point I've probably ordered 5 different belts just to find the perfect size. You know, it's a little bit like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. This belt is slightly too long, this belt is slightly too short, this belt is just right. So now that I've found the belt configuration that I like for this machine, I have already forgotten the length of it, but I have it in my email address, and should I need to order another one, I can order the right size the first time, and everything will be a lot easier. Obviously using like a tape measure or something will get you a pretty accurate guess on what size belt you'll need. So, you know, if you run a tape measure around the hand wheel and then connect it through the pulley, as if it was a belt, and then you pull it taut and then you look at the numbers. That will give you a pretty good idea. However, this particular belt, the textured rubber belt, is going to have a little bit of flex to it. So the length that's stated on the product page is not necessarily the length that you'll get, depending on how you arrange your motor or how much muscle you put into adjusting the camber, I guess I would call it, the camber of the motor in relation to the hand wheel. So I just wanted to demonstrate a few different things that it can do. First of all, obviously it is extremely quiet because it doesn't have the typical motor grunt that you would find on the potted motor or the belted motor. That's not to say that it's totally silent. It does make a sort of a breathing noise at low speeds, and it does make a little bit more noise when it's actually moving at high speeds. But the motor itself can go up to, I believe, 4,000 revolutions per minute. I have mine set to 1,400 because no matter how beefy or industrious the motor, this is still a domestic sewing machine. It is not going to suddenly turn into an industrial machine. So there are limitations to keep in mind, and there are sort of practical limits that you should put on the parts that are inside the machine. Of course, everybody says, well, I use my 201 to sew garment leather, I use my 201 to sew this and sew that, and that's great. It can certainly do that a few times, but it was not designed to do that stuff. And since I want to make sure to protect the machine at the expense of the motor, I have turned the motor down. So I'm not actually getting the full throttle power that the motor can deliver. I'm getting a amount of speed that is perfect for my needs, but is also not going to overwork the machine. So on full speed, when I put my foot down on the pedal, it's probably not as fast as a belted motor or a potted motor, and that's just up to my preference. I could speed it up, I could make it faster, I could make it the same speed, but it doesn't really bother me. I do a lot of very fine top stitching, so I don't really like to sew that quickly anyway. What else? That's about it for the basic facts of the machine. It took a while. It was, obviously not the cheapest route to go with because the table fabrication was quite expensive to have somebody cut it for me. The motor itself was very cheap. I think I got that on Amazon. I think it's $114, so not a huge expenditure in the motor. The machine I got from my grandmother, so that was free. But I have bought other machines, and so obviously you have to kind of weigh the costs. That's not to say that this configuration only works for the 201. I do have a 1591 that I reverted to a treadle configuration with a belt guard and took away the potted motor. And I like to use solid hand wheels because the solid hand wheel is just what I'm used to, so I don't really use the spoked wheels. You could use a spoked wheel on this, but I do not. So I used a solid hand wheel on the 1591. I think I put a video up earlier in the year kind of detailing that as well, but it was the same motor, it was the same everything. The belt is different. This is a different belt that I found at, what did I say, McMaster-Carr. It is a 6mm belt, so it does fit perfectly into the groove of the hand wheel. It's obviously a little loose on the pulley groove because the pulley groove is designed for an industrial machine that has a wider belt anyway. But those are the raw parts, and I like to be able to have one table that I can use to push I could put a Singer 6.6 in this thing. I could put the 1591 back in it. It is a lot of fun for me because I have a lot of machines, so it is nice to be able to have a little bit of variety in my life, if I wanted to sew on something different, it would always be compatible with this table. So I'm pretty happy with it, even though it was kind of an absurd proposal. I know that the local sewing machine store, when I called to get some information about what they're recommending, they of course told me just to get an industrial sewing machine, and I thought, well, what kind of fun is that? I mean, anyone can just buy something out of a box. I want to put it together myself, and I want to, I don't know what I wanted, but it does do it. It gives me everything that I did want from this machine. It does give you a lot more torque at low speeds, which is always nice because I sew a lot of denim. I think I'm sewing denim like 99% of the time. And when you're sewing through 6 layers of 10-ounce denim, it can be very difficult to have it go slowly. So very often I would find that in order to get a potted motor to go slowly, it doesn't have a lot of punching power to make it through all the layers slowly. So, and I guess I should clarify, my definition of slow is not extremely slow. The problem is that I like to use the longest stitch. So when I go a little bit too fast on the longest stitch and I'm trying to do a 1/8 of an inch top stitch or edge stitching on something, it gets pretty quick and it gets a little bit difficult to control. Obviously I could change to a smaller stitch length, or I could sew faster, or just become more proficient, but I use what I use because it works well for me. So your mileage may vary, but for me this is a perfect configuration, and I'm very pleased that I went through with the kind of the headache of sizing everything, and you know, you measure 8 times and then you get it cut and hopefully it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So I did have to go back over a couple of the details with my Dremel and you know, round some corners and cut this and shave that down just to make it fit a little bit better. But I suppose that if somebody was a little bit better at woodworking than I am, they would have no problem measuring and building a table for a servo if they wanted to go this route. Anyway, so enough talk. I've been talking all day, so let me show you just a basic thing that it can do. This is 2 layers of 10-ounce denim, and I'm just going to put it in the machine, and I will start with the needle up, which is a huge no-no, and everyone will be upset, but there is a method to the madness, so let's just go. So one thing I did want to mention is that this particular servo does not have a needle position sensor, also known as a needle synchronizer. You can buy servos with a synchronizer, and basically, if you're not too familiar with servo motors, a synchronizer is a device that plugs into where the clutch knob would go, and it will allow you to set the motor to stop turning the machine when the needle is in the down position. So if you're moving the if you're doing like a top stitching around a star, for example, and you want to keep the needle down, and you want to move the if you want to raise the presser foot, but you don't want to lose your spot, instead of remembering to use your eyes and your ears and everything like that to set the needle into the fabric before you raise the presser foot, you can get a position sensor that will do that for you. Now, I've heard limited experience with a needle position sensor for a vintage domestic like this. From what I've heard, it can be a little bit of a challenge to set up. It's not necessarily going to be as plug and play as it could be with a more traditional industrial sewing machine, just because the tolerances and the measurements could be different. I'm not exactly sure why, but I haven't bought one. I don't need one. For most of the sewing that I do, it's pretty slow, it's pretty controllable, so I don't necessarily need to make sure that the needle is always down. I can do that with my brain. So now that I've shown you the slow stitching, I'm just going to put my foot down, and you'll hear the motor make a little bit more noise, but it's nothing compared to the check spring or anything like that. Like, it's still a very quiet motor. And it is very easy to control, so like I can be not really paying attention and I'm still able to stop it with the needle in the down position. But you know, I've been using this machine every day for the past few months, so I'm a little bit more used to it than when I first got it. So that's on 2 layers, and I'm sure that everybody sitting and watching at home is like, yeah, but that's not that difficult for any machine. I can do that just fine with my potted motor. So that's not really anything that exciting to do. And in order to really show you the ability of this machine with the servo, I am going to up the ante. This is going to be, if I can count it correctly, this is 8 layers. And I wish I had like an assistant or somebody to verify that all this stuff is true, like a magician. But you can kind of see that there are indeed 8 layers there. And I haven't tried sewing this today, so we'll see how it goes. Now I'm going to start with the needle in the up position, and the reason why I'm doing that, I guess I didn't mention that before, the reason why I'm starting with the needle in the up position is because I want to show you how controllable the motor is. So it's not going to take off like a rocket unless I really stop down. It is a controllable speed. The pedal for these industrial motors is a large flat, you know, piece of metal. So it's a lot more controllable than, say, a tiny little plastic pedal that you would have with a potted motor or any other sort of domestic configured pedal. Industrial motors or industrial machine tables are a lot bigger, and the components are a lot bigger as well. So that means that I could put both of my feet on the pedal if I wished. I usually just use one foot on the pedal, but you know, the size does help you get a little bit more control with each foot push. I don't know what I was trying to say. With each time that I press on the pedal, it does seem to get a little bit easier. So needle in the up position, and I'm going to go slowly because I don't think that it'll be impressive to go quickly, because even a potted motor could make it through this thickness if you go quickly, but slow is something that's a real challenge. So let us pull it out, and I can show off the tension. So I used white thread on black denim for obvious reasons. So that is the needle thread, and this is the bobbin. The stitches are I was going to say that the stitches are very tight, but they popped out. So this is something that can be adjusted. I just haven't adjusted the thread for this, or I haven't adjusted the tension very well for this thread, but that doesn't show any kind of benefit whatsoever. So what I was going to say is yeah, these stitches are tight, and like kind of, you know, pull on it a little bit. Like I'm really struggling to rip the stitches, but it ripped very easily. So let me just turn it up a little bit. And then we will try it again. So this is an unedited video, and I do make mistakes because I'm not a newscaster. So let's try this again. So you can see that the fabric is so thick that you can barely, like, the foot barely moves when I drop it completely. So again, we're going to start. So let us try this again. There we go. I can already see that it's much better. So stitches on the top, quite a bit more defined than they were just a moment ago. And the bobbin stitch looks good as well. So now it's really, really quite tight. So that's awesome. That's pretty much all I wanted to show. As I said before, I don't do a lot of high-speed stitching, but also I don't think that high-speed stitching is really the test of how much piercing power a motor can deliver, because, as I said, I bet I could put those 8 layers of denim underneath the presser foot of my potted motor 201 and it would have no problem whatsoever getting through it lickety-split. But this time, I wanted to show the impressive piercing power of the servo by going slowly. So I apologize if you were hoping that I would really just take off like a rocket ship, but that is my thinking behind the slow stitching and why I've chosen to slow stitch for the video. All right, since you asked, let's do just one quick pass with this fabric. I'm gonna take this huge piece of fabric that I had, and I am going to fold it in half, and then I'm just going to let her rip, as everybody likes to say. So 4 layers of denim. This time I am going to start with the needle in the down position. I'm going to go a couple stitches. Why not? We have all the time in the world and we have plenty of space. So 2 stitches in, and I'm just going to go full speed all the way to the end just for grins. So again, as I said, this is not as fast as it could be configured. This motor can go a lot faster. It can go too fast, but it is where I have it set up for me, because I am never going to sew anything close to that fast for any of the top stitching that I do. But sometimes I do go full speed. And of course, I sometimes use a shorter stitch length as well, but I just wanted to do a super realistic video, and I didn't want to screw up all of my settings because I do have a lot of work to do. So I've got to get back to actually sewing, and I thought that you guys might enjoy seeing this video. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm not a servo machine expert. I'm not an industrial sewer. I do have an industrial machine, but I don't know a huge amount about them, but I can kind of walk you through most of the questions that you might have with this particular sewing machine. To recap, the highlights is that I did not modify this sewing machine in any way. It's just a regular 201 201k-3. I just took off the motor and the motor mount and put it in the table. So it's been a very good machine and I enjoy it, and if I wanted to, I could take this machine out and put the domestic belted motor back on, and I could bring it back to its factory configuration, I'll say, factory configuration, in just a few minutes. So it's a very easily reversible procedure to set up a servo table, and of course it's compatible with any machine that will fit into the hinges, and as long as you can strap the belt around the hand wheel, there is no domestic vintage Singer that I can think of that would not be workable for such a table. So I like it a lot. But thank you very much for watching. I hope that you learned something, and I apologize if you didn't.